Hello, I'm Lindsay Hooper and welcome to Goal's Transfer Talk Deadline Day special. We're into the final 24 hours and things are really hotting up. Last-minute wheeling and dealing, rush medicals and big gambles. It can only be one time of the year, the January transfer window. We're going to look across the top leagues in the world and find out who's made the biggest deals, splashed out the most cash on a new star, and also who's perhaps done the canniest business of all. I'm joined by Goal's international football writer Peter Staunton and UK correspondent Greg Stobart. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the show. We're also going to have our fingers on the pulse across Europe as well, with updates from our correspondents in both Milan and Madrid. But let's start by talking about the activity and a bit of the lack of it, actually, Peter. Let's start with why we think it's been such a quiet January so far.
January transfer window, you're not going to get wholesale squad changes halfway through a season unless things have gone drastically wrong. And most of the time, the clubs at the top end of the table, they're either going to do minimal business, one in, one out, like Manchester City have done, or else they might just go for a loan deal with a view to a permanent deal later on in summer. So the more organised you are, the less business I think you have to do in the January transfer window. But injuries and lack of form can always mean that one or two deals can slip through.
We are used to seeing the final few hours a flurry of activity, so where do we think business might be made?
I think where we're most likely to see business is towards the bottom end of the table, certainly in the Premier League, because you've got the big clubs who are looking to balance out their squads a bit. They might have one or two players who they've been looking to allow to leave on loan or on a permanent deal, and they haven't found the right deal. But it's that kind of time where if you're someone like Harry Redknapp at QPR, you get on the phone and you get the deals done, because there are a few bargains out there, there are a few good loans to do, and it could be the difference between staying up and going down.
And is it a fair assumption to make that the deals are less likely to be permanent ones, more likely to be loan moves?
Yeah, well, I think, in order to do a bit of bookkeeping, some of the bigger clubs, they've gone for loan deals in the January transfer window and then with a view to a permanent deal in summer. We've seen that with Nastasic, who's gone on loan to Schalke but will sign for around 12 million in the summer, and same with Alessio Cerci, who's gone back to Italy with AC Milan from Atletico Madrid, where it didn't work out for him. So from that perspective, it's generally risk-free. I mean, 6 months just to bed in and then a permanent deal in the summer. But big clubs, they don't generally go for loan deals as solutions for their own squads, certainly on a short-term basis like that.
In terms of figures as well, we've got used over the last few seasons to the totaliser increasing and increasing again. There are going to have to be some really big money moves made for that to happen this time.
I don't think there's going to be massive spending. I think a lot of clubs have clocked onto the fact that January isn't the time to get value for money, and it's not ever going to make a huge amount of difference to the squad, certainly for the top teams. I think we're looking at potentially this summer being the biggest transfer window in history. It's going to be absolutely huge, but I think clubs are waiting, keeping their powder dry and waiting for the summer, because the big players are not going to move in the middle of the season.
Well, despite all that, there have been some moves, and we're going to start with the Premier League, and some key acquisitions have been made by a few clubs, certainly ones towards the top. With few of the bigger clubs doing business in the Premier League this transfer window, it looks like only the Manchester clubs have dipped their toe into the market. The arrival of Victor Valdez at Old Trafford increases the competition for places there, although the outstanding David De Gea will be looking to hold on to his #1 spot for the rest of the season. Manchester City were yet again the big spenders, with Ivory Coast star Wilfried Bony swapping the Liberty Stadium for the Etihad. With a reported fee of over £28 million, the pressure is on the Ivorian to live up to the price tag. Well, we'll start by looking at the Manchester City big deal of this window, getting Wilfried Bony from Swansea. And Pete, let's start by saying that might also be freeing up the services of maybe Edin Dzeko making a move out.
Bonnie's a terrific signing for City because he knows the league inside out, and once he comes back from the African Cup of Nations where he's playing with Ivory Coast, he'll make an immediate impact in the City team, because if there's one area of that multi-million-pound squad that they've been light this season, it's up front with the departure of Negredo late in the summer window. So to get a player in like Bony, who scored more goals than anybody else in the Premier League in 2014, that will provide stiff competition for somebody like Dzeko, but it also should create a lot more goals for City, because it's an area that they've occasionally struggled.
We know Manuel Pellegrini likes to play 4-4-2 a lot, certainly at home. I think he's a perfect foil for Sergio Aguero there. He scored goals in the Premier League, he'll hit the ground running. Who knows, it might be a signing that wins in the Premier League. Negredo's going to sign for Valencia permanently in the summer. Wouldn't be surprised if Jovetic and Dzeko, as you mentioned, both leave, so they can balance the books and make it work. They may have overspent a bit, but I think it's an excellent signing.
And it was Nastasic, wasn't it, that was able to free up the money and free up the ability to be able to bring Bonnie in?
Manchester City, a big part of their thinking is UEFA's financial fair play regulations. They fell foul last season and they've been punished. So they're having a look at their squad and they managed to balance the books by letting Nastasic leave. I think Bonnie's contract is very heavily incentivised. It's worth £100,000 a week, but there are a lot of bonuses in there, a lot of goal-scoring bonuses, a lot of success-related bonuses. So they're managing just about to balance the books to make sure they don't fall foul of UEFA's rules again.
And there was one deal that I just thought, is that ever going to cross over the line? It seemed to drag on for quite a few days at Arsenal. Arsene Wenger eventually securing the services of Gabriel, and that was a position he really needed some support in, didn't he?
Yeah, well, it certainly did drag on, but it is exactly the sign they needed. We've seen Arsenal playing with Mathieu Debuchy and Nacho Monreal at centre-back at times this season, and Arsene Wenger was severely punished for not signing another centre-back last summer. So he's realised the error of his ways and got someone in, and that could be a very important signing. I think Gabriel will be able to come in. I don't think he'll replace Mertesacker or Koscielny, but he's a very useful option, and that's what Arsenal need because they've been quite shaky at the back lately. Personally, I think Arsenal should also have signed a defensive midfielder, but I think Francis Coquelin's form in the last month or so has convinced Arsene Wenger that he can wait until the summer for that.
Arsene Wenger then doing the business we think that he needed to do. Manchester United, obviously, Pete, they did a lot of business in the summer. They have brought in Victor Valdez. Is that going to be enough for them? Well,
the Valdez one is very, very interesting because, you know, here's a guy who's, decorated hugely from his time at Barcelona, winning the Champions League, and, you know, he hasn't come to sit on the bench at Man United. So, for me, what it does hint at is that perhaps they're already thinking about David De Gea's potential departure in the summer. Obviously, they're not going to want to lose him on a free transfer in 2016. So, you know, Victor Valdez to come in as cover until the end of the season and then take over as number one in the summer is probably the most likely scenario for United fans, whether they like it or not.
Well, Valdez's last club was Barcelona, and we know there's been a forced lack of activity there. Let's get the latest on all that's been happening in La Liga. As Barcelona are under a transfer embargo, it was always going to fall to the Madrid clubs to formulate much of the major business in La Liga this January. Norwegian wonder kid Martin Ødegaard is the hottest young property on the planet right now, and he was snapped up by Real Madrid. Life at the Bernabeu will be tough for this highly rated youngster, but what a place to learn alongside Ronaldo and Zidane. The return of the prodigal son for the other half of the city, Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid have bought old favourite Fernando Torres back home on loan from AC Milan. Whether this return to his boyhood club will see Torres back to his best, we'll have to wait and see. Let's cross to our correspondent over in Spain. Ben Hayward is in Madrid. Ben, what's been the latest going on over there?
Hi Lindsay. Yeah, it's been a busy month over here in Spain. Obviously, it's been quiet in Barcelona. Barcelona have the FIFA ban in 2015 and can't bring any players, so it's been a quiet month in the Catalan capital. Madrid obviously are under investigation now by FIFA too for possible irregularities in the signing of youngsters. So they've moved to sign Martin Ødegaard, the young Norwegian sensation who was wanted by half of Europe's elite and has come in to join the club. He's been joined by Lucas Silva, the Brazilian midfielder who is perhaps a long-term replacement for Sami Khedira, who's out of contract in the summer. And Ødegaard could play some part at the end of this season despite his young age. So that's interesting. Over Atletico, also in Madrid, the big story is the return of Fernando Torres, the prodigal son. He's been scoring goals already. He scored twice in the Copa del Rey against Real Madrid. He also scored against Barcelona. So this link up with Simeone and the return to form is a great story. Atletico have also brought in Cani in the midfield. Another interesting signing there, perhaps a little bit unexpected. Big stories happening in the capital. And then over at Valencia, there's another exciting project. And agent Jorge Mendes has told Manchester United that Nicolas Otamendi, who's become something of a symbol for them really at Mestalla, they've told them, Manchester United, that he's not for sale at any price. So he'll go on to form part of that project. And in the meantime, Villarreal have sold Gabriel to Arsenal, and that's pretty much what's been happening in a busy month in Spain.
Well, the way that football is going, it's no surprise that we're hearing of a footballer aged just 17 years old in Martin Ødegaard on a reported £60,000 to £80,000 a week. Peter, I'm going to start with this story. It has to be the biggest one, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the saga of where Martin Odegaard would have been playing his football after leaving Strømgodset is, you know, really captivated European audiences over the past few months since the Norwegian League season ended. You know, we know he's visited Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, he's visited Arsenal, Man United. He's, you know, been all over the place, and seemingly with his father and his agent, they've made the collective decision to go to Real Madrid. Now, I'm not so sure if the Real Madrid Castilla is the best place for reportedly the hottest teenage talent on the planet to develop.
And Greg, why do you think that is?
Well, personally, I think for a 17-year-old, you want to see them playing in the best environment to learn and to improve playing football, and that's at a decent club. You know, when you look at teams like Ajax, we're interested in him. That's a perfect move for a 17-year-old. You do 4 years or so playing in the Eredivisie, learning your trade, and then you're ready for a move to a club like Real Madrid. But at the moment, he's not going to play for Real Madrid, and I really do hope that they let him play football for a proper team. So hopefully they'll allow him to leave on loan at some point.
Okay, we'll go on next to Fernando Torres. I'm going to start with you actually, Greg, on this, because obviously we're covering the UK. Obviously at Chelsea he had some fraught seasons, but he seems to have really taken to life back at his old club at Atletico Madrid. Yeah,
well, it was pretty much exactly 4 years ago that he signed for Chelsea for a British record transfer fee, £50 million, and now they're letting him go for free. They've let him go, and anyone who's seen Torres in the last few years would have thought that he was done. He was toast. He never once at Chelsea or Milan looked like he could possibly rediscover his old form, but he's already scored 3 goals for Atletico. He's obviously got his confidence back. He feels at home. And of all Diego Simeone's achievements, if he gets Fernando Torres firing again, that'll be near the top.
And he scored in important games as well. In terms of why he didn't ever really cut the mustard at Chelsea, do you think that was a crisis of confidence? Because it appears going back to his boyhood club, the place where he's got great memories, seems to have brought something back.
There's no doubt about that, you know, been among home comforts has changed him. Certainly, you know, in the first few weeks of his homecoming, as it were, at Atletico Madrid, you know, he was an ex-teammate of Simeone, so the two know each other quite well, and Simeone will know which buttons to press to make sure that Torres gets his form back and gets his confidence back, moreover.
Finally, in Spain, have Barcelona missed a trick here? Because the embargo that they've had, it does mean that they may be a slight bit behind Real Madrid now.
Absolutely, yeah. They really should have done better business in the summer. There's no doubt about that. They signed Jeremy Mathieu, Thomas Vermaelen and Douglas to play in defence, and you know, other than Mathieu, the other two have been, you know, total bombs. And even that, Mathieu isn't really Barcelona standard. They probably should have done better business in terms of Juan Cuadrado. He was available for them in the summer, but they opted not to do it. And you know, now they see themselves embroiled in a title race with Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid. But then they've got the outside threat of Valencia, who could even usurp them now this season. And the signing 25 million for Enzo Perez from Benfica this winter has been one of the most notable deals in my eyes.
Okay, well, 2 more leagues for us to catch up on, including Bundesliga and Serie A. It's Inter Milan who've been the big mover and shaker in the transfer window this time around in Serie A, with the acquisitions of Lucas Podolski from Arsenal and playmaking midfielder Xherdan Shaqiri. They'll be looking to improve on last year's 5th place finish. In Bundesliga, struggling Borussia Dortmund have snapped up Slovenian international Kevin Campbell from Red Bull Salzburg, as Jurgen Klopp looks to turn their season around. We're heading over to Italy next, and we're joined by Chief Editor of Goal Italy, Federico Cassotti. Federico, thank you very much for joining us. What can you tell us about the activity in Serie A?
Hi Lindsay, ciao from Italy. You know, here in Milano there's a hotel who is the headquarters of the Italian transfer window, and as you can imagine, today is going to be a very busy and crowded and chaotic place. Anyway, this has been a pretty quieter session compared to the past ones, with most of the clubs who proved to have a better strategy. Napoli, for example, bought Gabbiadini and Strinic already in the beginning of January, while Internazionale hired Shaqiri, Podolski and Brozovic in a reasonable advance. Anyway, today there's still room for some good deals. One of these is linked to Juventus. Juventus is looking for a backup striker after they gave the permission to Sebastian Giovinco to join Toronto Football Club 5 months in advance. The chosen one is going to be Pablo Daniel Osvaldo. The Argentinian-born striker is currently out of favour at Internazionale after he clashed with Roberto Mancini, and Southampton, who is the owner of the player, is ready to loan him to Juventus for the second time after the positive spell he had last year in January 2014. Surprisingly, he left good memories in Turin, so all the players, Carlos Tevez first, are ready to welcome him back. But only in the next hours we will discover if really Pablo Daniel Osvaldo is set to join Juventus once again.
So Roberto Mancini has begun the rebuilding process at Inter Milan, and Greg, that's where we're going to start. Do you think he's made some key signings?
Well, they've had a good January. They needed it. They've had a disastrous season so far, but the signing of Shaqiri is a real coup because there were a lot of teams that were interested in him. I think a club like Liverpool or Tottenham in the Premier League should have done more to get Shaqiri because I think he'd be very useful in the Premier League, but really good signing. He'll add a lot of dynamism in the final third, and of course they've got Lucas Podolski, and he wasn't playing as much as he wanted at Arsenal. He got very frustrated, but you know what you're going to get with Podolski, and that's goals, and I think his left foot could be very useful for them. It's not as athletic a league as the Premier League, so he could adapt quite well to Italian football. And of course they signed Brozovic as well, so they're looking better on paper at least.
He had something of a pop as well, didn't he, at Arsene Wenger, saying that he should have played him more. Is that something that we thought he would be so outspoken about?
Well, he's always been outspoken. I was a little bit surprised by that, but you can understand where he's coming from. He'd come off the bench and he'd score a goal and he'd find himself out of the squad again on the Saturday. But you look at the players that were ahead of him, the likes of Welbeck, Sanchez, Oxlade-Chamberlain, he didn't really deserve to start. He was a good super sub, and if he wanted to play 90 minutes, he had to move on, and that's what he's done.
Pete, you've got the enviable task of filling us in on the rest of Italy, really. We'll start with Napoli, because they've done some business.
Yeah, they've brought in Manolo Gabbiadini and Ivan Strinic, two players who they probably could have done with during the summer. I mean, Napoli were criticised for not spending more money. Aurelio De Laurentiis, the club president, was reluctant to open the purse strings in the summer, and they ended up being dumped out of the Champions League qualifiers to Athletic Bilbao. They've rectified some of that by bringing in the striker that they needed and a left back as well in Strinic and in Gabbiadini. And for the second half of the season, the focus will very much be on taking that third Champions League place away from who's ever contending it come the end of the season. Juventus didn't spend, they'll probably win the league again, and the closest team to them will probably be Roma. Now Roma have made some interesting acquisitions in this January transfer window, none more so than Seydou Doumbia, the Ivory Coast international who's moved for big money from CSKA Moscow. Now he said that it was a dream of his to play alongside Francesco Totti, and with Matteo Destro obviously joining AC Milan on loan, obviously Salvo Bocchetti's gone to Milan too, but particularly with Destro gone on loan, Roma needed something else up front, and Doumbia is a really fast player, and once he gets in behind the defence he can finish, and he could be the difference between third and second for Roma come the end of the season. The one league that's been significantly quiet has been Bundesliga, and I think you'd probably both be in agreement that the big signing was Kevin Campbell going from Red Bull Salzburg. What do you make of him as a player? I think he's a good player. You know, he's a quick player. He's quite direct, and he will suit some sort of counter-attacking style that Jurgen Klopp purveys every now and again. They really needed to do something, Borussia Dortmund, in the January transfer window. They had a terrible first half of the season, and they actually find themselves bottom after one game of the second half of the season. And they couldn't really bring forward too much money from their summer budget because they have no idea whether they're going to be in the Champions League or not, and it's highly unlikely that they will be. But Campbell has given them that quick boost, and what we've seen from Red Bull Salzburg as well is some really good deals on the way out. They're going to sew up the Austrian league again, but they've sold for about 15 million Campbell to Borussia Dortmund, and also Alan, who's gone to Guangzhou Evergrande for about 11 million. On Dortmund, I'm surprised they didn't make a little bit more of a move to sign Schürrle. They knew he wanted to come back to Germany. He's obviously gone to Wolfsburg. I think they could have made a bit more of a move for him because they're going to lose Marco Reus in the summer, and he would make a good like-for-like replacement. Well, we've covered most of the signings. Looking back on previous seasons, there's been some very good, astute signings that have happened in January, and I'm asking you to put your Mystic Meg hats on here and just tell us who you think will be the ones to watch from this window, starting with you, Pete. I think Wilfried Bony is going to score loads of goals for Manchester City in the Premier League. I think Seydou Doumbia, his compatriot, is going to do likewise for Roma in Italy. And I think in Spain, I think Martin Odegaard you know, more for commercial purposes than anything else, might get a few minutes towards the end of the season for Real Madrid. But I would expect him to have the league wrapped up by that stage before he features.
I think Victor Valdez could be a strangely important signing for Manchester United, because if David De Gea does leave, they've got a replacement for nothing, and that will allow them to invest in other areas of the squad that really need work. They need a central midfielder, they need a defender, and they've got a world-class goalkeeper waiting in the wings who's cost them nothing.
Pete, Greg, thank you both for coming on and talking January transfers with us.
Thanks,
My pleasure, Lindsay.
Thank you. And you can keep across all the latest transfers on Goal. We've got a dedicated team of experts on there 24/7. And also coming soon, we've got the wealthiest footballers in the world in Goal's Rich List 2015. Goodbye for now.